Good afternoon, CTC 7300. It's good to see y'all. My project, or my paper rather, was on Booker T. Washington versus W.E.B. Du Bois. Two influential people within American history, more specifically in black history. To understand the two debates, I think that you fully need to understand American history, and just real briefly, and not to insult anybody's intelligence, but we of course have slavery instituted in the South prior to the Civil War. We have the Civil War. Lincoln signs the Emancipation Proclamation. The Civil War ends, of course, and the North is declared victorious. The Northern soldiers and the Union come into the South in the name of Reconstruction, and this is a time for the civil rights that's actually very good. History doesn't record it very much so, but it was only a period of that time for about 9 years where you had the influence of the North directly into the South. That ends, the Northern influence ends, or the Northern control ends, because of a presidential election of Rutherford B. Hayes. It was a close election, and he actually is declared the winner because of the South's support. And the only way they could get that support was to end that Northern influence and control. So at that point is where we begin our story of the plight and of the segregation rather of American history and the black culture. So we'll begin with Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois, they never really had a formal debate. It was more of a battle of words, but it really begins, the actual debate would probably begin considering with the Atlanta Compromise, which was a speech that Booker T. Washington gave in Atlanta in 1895. It was then contradicted by W.E.B. Du Bois in 1903 in essays entitled The Souls of Black Folk. These two works by these men were exquisite, and they both have valid points, but yet they are still contradictory. Booker T. Washington was born in 1856 in Virginia. He was actually born into slavery. He was freed, obviously, at the end of the Civil War, and he was 9 years old in 1865 at that end. He actually had no last name. He was just Booker. And they asked for his last name when he attended school, so he actually just assumed the last name of his owner, which was Washington, and this was a common practice of the day. Booker records in his autobiography that he actually felt empowered when he did that because it gave him equal status as his owner. So it was a very gratifying sensation for Booker. He goes through school. He's a very successful student. He attends a school that was established for African American students that were former slaves. He winds up going to the Hampton Institute, and he graduates from that in 1876. He actually returns to that institute at Hampton and begins to teach, and does an excellent job there. He's probably the most celebrated and most honored alumnus of that institute. But the administrator of the institute that he attended would go on to recommend him to be the administrator at a new institute in Tuskegee, Alabama. And of course we know that it's Tuskegee Institute. So he would move there, and he would start the Tuskegee Institute for African Americans in 1881. Tuskegee was started as a place to learn agriculture, mechanics, and other industrial skills. This is a complete opposite of any classical training that was done in American colleges at the time. Booker T believed that we should be able to teach technical skills to the everyday person, and that by doing that, you would become, I guess you'd say, more attractive, you would become viable for the community because your skills were needed. And also, something interesting here is the Institute began with a budget of $2,000, which even in that time would not be considered very much. I mean, it was a lot of money, but not enough to start a college. Booker T was a very, very good politician. He was also very well respected among the white community, and actually received a lot of philanthropy through Carnegie and other rich, very wealthy Americans throughout the North, and even some in the South. Students were actually encouraged, if they couldn't afford it, they were actually encouraged to get a job during the day. They could attend school at night. And they were also encouraged to gain employment through an industrial job of some kind, or a mechanical job. So it was a very interesting concept that he devised. Through his works at Tuskegee in the last 14 years, in 1895, because he was respected and because he was well thought of as a black leader, he was asked to speak at an exposition for cotton, which was a very revolutionary idea for the time. They were actually worried about a black man speaking at a white event. The catch was, though, there were going to be some northerners from there, and they were trying to impress these northern investors and such. So they were trying to show how the South is integrated, so what better way was to put a black man on the stage. But they were nervous. The interesting thing, though, is his speech was so eloquent, and he started off by telling a story of a stranded ship, and the ship had been there for days, and there was a rescue party sent out, and I am paraphrasing, and there was a rescue ship sent out, and they found the ship. And the rescue boat was actually much bigger and taller, and the people from the bottom of the stranded ship holler up and say, "Cast down your buckets, for we're thirsty. Cast down your buckets full of water. We are so thirsty." And so he used that in many different directions, and he used it for the African Americans, that they were thirsty. They needed stuff. They needed education. So he was looking to the rescue ship of America to cast down their buckets. But he also turned it around and said that America needed African Americans, because African Americans knew and understood the country. And they didn't have a foreign tongue, and they didn't look different. They looked like everybody had seen them before. They were part of the community, and they had something to offer. And America was thirsty for a workforce, especially in a devastated South. So his famous lines would cast down their buckets. He would go on in his speech, and I think this is, and there was a lot of great words, but this is something that I really felt, and this is really his position that he's taken. And he was quoted as saying in his speech, "Our greatest danger is that in the great leap from slavery to freedom, we may overlook the fact that the masses of us are to live by the productions of our hand, and fail to keep in mind that we shall prosper in the proportion as we learn to dignify and glorify a common laborer, and put brains and skills into the common occupations of life, shall prosper in the proportion as we learn to draw the line between the superficial and the substantial, the ornamental jaws of life and the useful. No race can prosper till it learns that there is much dignity in tilling a field as in writing a poem. It is the bottom of life we must begin, and not at the top. Nor should we permit our grievances to overshadow our opportunities." I think this is an important passage, and there's a lot to that, and more than we could really go into in this presentation. But there's a lot of social implications that Booker T has put into this one little quote. W.E.B. Du Bois was born in Massachusetts in 1868. Post-Civil War, And also he was born into a community that was known for its abolitionist roots prior to the Civil War. He was raised in a totally integrated society, which is completely opposite of Booker T, who was obviously raised as a slave, and then post-slavery. He was schooled in classical training all the way through elementary and all the way through college. His social status was just as equal as anybody. He ate with whites. He played with whites. He did everything. There was no color boundary at all in this small town in Massachusetts. So a very different background already. He's actually receives a scholarship to attend Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee. And he tells a story, actually, this is the first time he's ever experienced anything like this. He's walking down the street and he accidentally bumps into a white lady, and not anything egregious or anything tough or bad. It was just a light little tap on the shoulder, and he didn't mean to. And he tips his hat and he apologizes, and the lady is just gasped and galled, and she's just mortified, and she begins to verbally, I don't know if cuss him out is the right term, but she treats him very brutally verbally, and he is perplexed by this. He doesn't understand it, and he goes on and he experiences a lot of the Jim Crow laws of the South, something that was completely foreign to him. He finishes his degree at Fisk, and he goes to Harvard, and he actually receives a PhD. And he's actually the first African American to ever do so. He dedicates his life to being an activist for civil rights, and he was a very great writer. And he actually wrote The Souls of the Black Folk in 1900, but it wasn't published until 1903. But it was a compilation of essays and broken into chapters. And one of the chapters he actually is called To Mr. Booker T. And he discusses the things that Booker T has spoken for, because Booker T. Washington has gained political and social status that is at the top. He is seen as the leader of the black community within the nation and in the South. And so his ideas are what is being prospered and what is being prevailed. And so he is contradicting these ideas of Booker T. Washington. He challenges them directly. He felt as though the college should focus on the education of African Americans in the classics, much of what he had learned throughout his life. It's one of his famous quotes, and I think is important to discuss, is, "Suppose we seek to remedy this by making them laborers and nothing more. They are not fools. They have tasted of the tree of life, and they will not cease to think, will not cease attempting to read the riddle of the world. By taking away their best equipped teachers and leaders, by slamming the door of opportunity in the faces of their bolder and brighter minds, will you make them satisfied with their lot? Or will you not rather transfer their leading from the hands of men, taught to think, to the hands of untrained demagogues? We ought not forget that despite the pressures of poverty, and despite the active discouragement and increases among Negro youth," excuse me, I'm skipping the line, "and even the ridicule of friends, the demand for higher training steadily increases among Negro youth. Here, then, is the plain thirst for training. By refusing to give the talented tenth the key to knowledge, can the sane man imagine that will lightly lay aside their yearning and contently become hewer of wood and drawers of water?" In other words, what he's saying is the top 10% will never be satisfied just being a skilled laborer. To really look at them side by side, Booker T believed in education for everyone. He believed that from the common person we would come up. W.E. believed in education for the talented tenth. Booker T believed training should be done in agriculture and industrial setting, and W.E.B. Du Bois should be placed on the classics. And then Booker T, and I think here's probably the best depiction, Booker T believed skilled black laborers would make African Americans socially and politically equal in time. And W.E.B. Du Bois believed classical trained black professionals would teach other African Americans and gain social and political equality instantly, or rather in a very short amount of time. To further look at them side by side, and this is my opinion, Booker T believed in creating a foundation of the black workforce to be accepted in a white-dominated society, whereas W.E. believed in a trickle-down education. He believed that African Americans should demand equality within white-dominated society. And I think the question is really, which one's right? Which one was the right way to look at it? And I think that even though Booker T is probably more well known, his thought and theory prevailed throughout time. I really think that both of them were on the right track. They both came from different perspectives, both had two different theories of thought, but in the end, I think their goal was the same. And it's kind of like fighting fire. If you fight it from one side, it'll take a little bit longer. But if you get on both sides of the fire and fight it and meet in the middle somewhere, you put the fire out a whole lot faster. And I think the two were on the right track. It's just they were on different fronts of the fight. And in the end, and I think we're seeing the product of that end today with our first black president and many, many other accomplishments that we have seen throughout time. I thank you for your time, and if you got any questions, please post on Blackboard. I'll be willing to answer anything that you have. Thank you and have a great day.